colonize here. Basically, this setup right here is going to keep me busy for quite a while because I've got a lot of planets to colonize. Now, thankfully, yeah, and I've got 2 more here. I don't have any over in Hebron, so I don't have to worry about that. Hey, maggot. Sounds so bad, always. Just doing a tutorial for this. So one of the important things that you need to do once you've taken stock of the planets that you do have is we have to understand that you have only 100,000 credits starting in your treasury. Now, this is if you haven't changed the starting amount of credits. But even if you have, it's always a good idea and very, very necessary to check and see one critical thing when you're going to see what planets you want to colonize. And say I want to colonize Caladan 5. This has less resources than my actual homeworld. Whatever. You know, you're going to want to colonize everything you can colonize anyway. It's more of a matter of, you know, development cost is the big one. So here's what this means. Development cost is 6,880. It's a fantastically low number. The lowest number I've ever seen is 72. That means $72, for lack of a better word. I'm not recording this, Spartan, but I'm going to highlight it afterwards, so no worries. Because I don't plan on going and doing this every time I go to play the game or anything. You know, going through a tutorial. So the development cost is a huge importance. And the reason why is because it's telling you how much it costs for you to develop this. Now, when it's kind of deceptive, because you might think, okay, this is my flat fee, right? I have to pay 6,880. And then it's colonized. Well, no, that's not how it works. How it works is, when you go to colonize this planet, you'll drop your colony down, and it'll show up as an underdeveloped colony. The development cost will be negative 6,880. We'll call them credits, I guess. Until that colony becomes self-sufficient, which it'll give you a message for that, which means that your climate hazard is close enough into the green area up here that you're not actually, it's close enough to the middle that you're not actually needing to terraform anymore. Until that is the case, you're going to be spending money on that planet every turn toward development of it. Now, every turn, the more you develop it, the less money you pay. But it's not an initial flat fee. So when you look at a planet, I'm going to look at whatever the most is here. Okay, Caladan 2 here. This is 96,000. Now, that's not insanely high. Apparently, people have seen upwards of 1 million, which is horrifying. I'd never colonized something that horrifying. But if you consider that it's not a flat fee, 96,000, that means you're going to be raping 96,000 and, you know, somewhere around 90,000 for a couple of turns, and until you start really knocking money off of that by developing it. So you have to plan accordingly. In the beginning of the game, you don't want to colonize planets, no matter how nice they might be. You know, they might have insane resources or something like that, or be a huge size, because this is only size 3 as well. So no matter how nice they are, you might want to skip them until you've got a nice chunk of change sitting, you know, in reserve for you to go ahead and colonize that. Now, one of the things that's going to make this faster for development is when you send your colony ship, like I said, it's going to come up with a message eventually, you know, after X turns, because it depends on how many colony ships you have in your fleet, and it'll go faster depending on that. It's going to come up with a message and say, colony is developed now, it's self-sustaining. So, do you want to continue to support the colony for 4 turns or 5 turns or however many turns, or do you want to finish colonizing? So what that means is, and what is usually the best possible idea, especially on a planet that is still low infrastructure and still needs a little bit more terraforming, because some planets finish and they're still a little negative, You want to get that up into making you money as quickly as possible, and the only way it's going to do that is if you get the infrastructure up and make sure there's no more terraform you need. So the best way to do that is say, yes, I want to keep supporting this colony for 4 more turns, 5 more turns, whatever it is. So while you won't be able to use your colonization fleet, you will be able to keep improving that planet exponentially faster than you would if you left it there to do it on its own at that point, even though it's self-sufficient, right? So that is something you need to do, and that will also lower your development costs a lot faster, and it will increase your income from that a lot faster. Then when that's done, it'll finally, end up it'll either ask you again to continue, or after X amount of turns, or the colony ship will simply finish its mission and end up back at the planet that you launched it from, which is generally in the beginning, of course, from your capital, which is fine. So let me go over how fleets work. Because I'm trying to decide what order I want to go in. Like I said, with colonization fleets, we'll start with survey fleets because I talked about them a while ago. On every system, you can click on it. By default, it shows you the planets, as we've already seen. When you click on the Fleets tab, it obviously shows you the fleets and stations that you may have there. You start with one naval base, in your homeworld system. It protects you against some pirates and shit like that in the beginning, so it's good that it's there. And it also gives you the ability to base out of there. From what I have seen, unless you have a station on a planet that has a decent amount of docking capability, because there are hangars or like docks you can build on the stations, you cannot rebase your fleet from one system to another until you have that there. So that's one reason why you start with a naval base in this game. So for example, if I want my survey fleet to be over here, I can relocate over here. Now apparently I'm wrong, because I can relocate here and there is no station here. So I'm going to guess that it's also based upon the fact that your first survey fleet is pretty small. If it serves me correctly, my memory serves me, it's only 5 ships. Right. No, 6. Okay. So it could be just that you're able to, so long as you have, so long as you have a small number of ships. Otherwise, you might need to build docks. Anyway, back to the survey fleet. So, to see what's in your fleet, you click on the little arrow, which changes direction and then points down, and it tells you how many command points you have left in that fleet, so you can figure out roughly how many more ships you can add. I believe everybody starts with 8 ships possible at the very beginning in their fleet. And then when you click on this arrow, little triangle, next to the name of the ships, it actually comes up with the name of the individual ships, shows a blueprint of it, shows you what weapons it has, which is the little purple laser down there and the missile. Shows you basically at a glance all the information you need to know, and the upkeep of the ship, and how many years in service. Now the important thing about that is simply that green bar. And that green bar is at a glance going to show you that the ships are either fully capable or they are damaged. And so that is going to let you know whether or not you need to repair them. Now, it stands to reason that creating a fleet is probably one of the most confusing things in the game in the beginning, because no one explains how they work. But you can, just by looking at the composition of fleets, figure out, okay, this is what I need to have in each fleet. So the constant in each fleet is that you need supply ships, and you need 1 command ship to form a fleet. Now here's how combat works. Let's say you get into combat with your fleet, and your command ship gets destroyed. Well, if your command ship gets destroyed, your ships will continue to fight until the end of the combat, whether they win or lose. And whether they win or lose, what will happen, because their admiral is gone, whether he's dead or not is determined upon various, percentages of escape chances. But the command ship is gone. So the fleet scatters to the wind, basically. And what happens is, when you make new ships, they go into this reserve. So if your command ship is destroyed in a fleet, even if they won and took a system, for example, they would not stay in that system. And from what I understand, they always end up going back into the reserve. Now, I think they end up going back to the reserve, from what I remember, based out, or in the planet that they're based out of. So, say I launched them from Caladan, this system. If the admiral died and or just the command ship was destroyed, the fleet would scatter and end up back in the reserve in Caladan. The important part about that is, if you didn't know that, then you wouldn't know where your fleet went, and you'd think it was all dead. But in reality, it's just going back there. At that point, what you need to do is reform the fleet. And the only thing you have to do at that point, assuming you didn't lose any other ships, is rebuild the command ship. And I'm going to open up the fleet manager, because that's going to show you where you would be building your fleet. Now, I can't really show you here because we don't have any ships, but it's really self-explanatory at this point once you know a few things. Okay. When you have your reserve, the way I do it, and there's probably a simpler, a way with a little bit less steps, but it's just because I normally build the command ship first and then build the other ships anyway when I'm building a fleet. I build the command ship, come into the fleet manager, select the command ship, which would show up under the reserve. I'd click on it. Then I'd click Create Fleet. Then what you get is an Admiral Manager. And Admirals have, different stats here. And they also have years as Admiral. The longer they've been in service, the more effective they are, apparently. And then they also have their traits, like True Grit. Fleet Endurance, I don't know exactly what Fleet Endurance is, because it says it increases it by 1 to 2 turns. But then there's Green Thumb, which is increase in terraforming while running colonized missions, Pathfinder, which is reduced time for survey missions, things like that. So you'd pick an admiral and you'd hit Create Fleet, and then, of course, it's bitching at me because I need a command ship, and then you'd hit OK. Then it would ask you for a name, and then your fleet would show up on the side. So, assuming it was First Colonization Fleet, let's say I just made that, it would just have a command ship. And then what you do is, when the other ships are finished, or if they are already finished, they'll show up here. You just select everything that you want, click on it, and drag it down into the fleet you want. And that'll just add it. Once you have everything in the fleet that you want, you can actually... This is basically how your fleet is going to be when it's deployed. Yeah, there is a wiki. That's correct. And you can choose where you want to put the ships, which direction you want them to be facing when they're deployed, and such. So, we'll jump at that screen for now. We'll go back to the survey fleet again. But like I was saying, you need to survey systems in order to know what's in them, and to know if they're viable for colonization. So, right-clicking on planets is a way to pretty much bring up every possible type of thing that can happen here. But actually selecting a fleet first does nothing. So, anyway, you can hit survey. That'll bring up this menu. It tells you the ETA is 5 turns. There's no cost associated with it. So you click on the survey fleet, or you can even survey with other things. They just take forever. If you were to use the colonization fleet, it would take 6 turns. In the beginning, it's not going to take that much longer, but when you're going further away, it's going to be a lot more annoying. So you click on the survey fleet and hit confirm.
Yes, Director. We'll map the system.
And then you'll see, okay, here's how here's the line showing where it's going, and the target of actions, any system that's being targeted by an action, whether that's colonization or patrol or anything, or not planets but system, will show up with this green